In the 3rd century AD, a Roman legionary reaching into his pocket still held the same silver denarius, but he was no longer carrying the same money. Same coin, same name, same imperial seal, but it had been hollowed out from within. What brought Rome down wasn't the barbarian armies beyond its borders. It was a rot working silently and slowly within the empire's own treasury. The story we're telling today isn't about swords, it's about coins. Because the quietest way to destroy a civilization isn't to invade it, it's to destroy trust in its currency. To understand economics, we first have to accept something. Money is not a metal disc or a piece of paper. Money is a shared agreement among millions of people, each saying to the other, "What you're giving me has value, and I believe what I'm giving you has value too." In other words, an economy isn't really a mechanical machine. It's a moral and social ecosystem built on trust, behavior, and human nature. As long as a society trusts its currency, trade flows, armies are fed, cities grow. But the moment that trust breaks, no matter how strong the rest of the system appears, it begins to collapse from within. That is exactly Rome's story. A structure solid on the outside, rotten on the inside. At first, the denarius was minted from nearly pure silver, about 95% silver content, which made it a trusted medium of exchange both within and beyond Rome's borders. But as the empire grew, so did its expenses exponentially. Feeding a massive army, defending the borders, offering the people bread and circuses, building palaces and roads, all of it demanded enormous amounts of money. When tax revenue could no longer satisfy this appetite, the emperors found a simple but fatal solution. Reduce the silver content in each coin and fill the rest with cheap metal. This way, they could make more payments with the same number of coins. In short, they weren't solving the problem. They were spreading it into the future as an invisible tax. This is one of history's oldest, yet least understood tricks. Let's expose the hidden truth. Devaluation isn't openly taxing the people. It's devaluing the money already in their hands without their noticing. A farmer or a soldier sees that the number of coins he holds hasn't changed, but the bread, meat, or land he can buy with those coins keeps shrinking. By the 3rd century, the silver content of the denarius had dropped below 5%. The coin was no longer silver, it was copper, coated in silver. And people, just as happens today, gradually began to notice. Prices were rising mercilessly, while wages and salaries stayed the same. This was one of history's first great hyperinflations, and records show that prices for some goods rose by thousands of times within a century. So how did this rot bring down the army and trade? The answer lies in human behavior. When soldiers saw they were being paid in increasingly worthless coin, their loyalty to the empire cracked. Some legions revolted, some backed rival commanders, some simply stopped fighting. Merchants grew wary of long-distance trade because of unreliable currency, weakening the economic networks that connected cities to one another. Farmers abandoned trust in the cash economy and reverted to bartering. In other words, money was the invisible nervous system holding society together. And when that nervous system became paralyzed, the empire's muscles, its army, its trade, its cities, lost their function one by one. The barbarian invasions were certainly real, but they delivered the final blow to a structure that was already rotten from within, defenseless and fragmented. They were the consequence of the collapse, not its cause. What's truly striking here is decoding the relationship between power and money. Devaluation wasn't an accident that happened by chance. It was a method by which those in power secretly transferred resources away from the public's sight. Whoever holds the authority to mint money holds real power, because they can create wealth without creating value, at least in the short term. Roman emperors used this power for political survival, to pay soldiers, to placate the public, to preserve their rule. But this was borrowed power, power stolen from the people's future. And history shows us that this kind of power, sooner or later, drags down with it the very trust it was built upon. Now let's bring this to the present, because there's a striking bridge between past and present. In modern economies, we no longer scrape silver off coins. Instead, we expand the money supply. We print digital or paper money. The mechanism looks different, but the logic is the same. When the amount of money circulating in the system grows faster than the real value being produced, the purchasing power of every single unit erodes. Just as the silver in a Roman soldier's coin melted away, today, an employee's salary silently loses its purchasing power. Siri receipts swell, rent rises. But nowhere does a headline actually read, "tax increase." Because throughout history, inflation has always been the most insidious, the most invisible tax. And this is exactly where financial education stops being a luxury and becomes a survival and protection strategy. The ordinary Roman citizen didn't understand economics. He realized too late that his coin was losing value and turned too late to tools that could protect his savings. Yet throughout history, some people have always done the same thing. They turn to assets that don't lose value. Land, fertile soil, precious metals, real productive assets. The same principle holds true today. Understanding how your money works, why it loses value, and which assets tend to hold their worth over time, is a real shield protecting you against the system's invisible erosion. Financial literacy, here, quite literally, functions as a tool of defense. Like a shield, protecting you from an erosion you don't even notice. But this story doesn't end on a pessimistic note, because Rome's true legacy isn't collapse. It's the capacity to adapt and endure. Even after the empire fractured, Byzantium minted a new, valuable, pure gold coin, the solidus, which held its stability for centuries, because the lesson of the past had been learned. Money earns trust only through discipline and honesty. The same lesson applies to individuals. Resilience in the face of economic turmoil is built through knowledge. Diversifying your savings, questioning your spending habits, moving away from the assumption that everything will always stay the same. What history teaches us is simple yet profound. Empires don't fall by the sword, but by the erosion of trust, and individuals can only protect themselves from this same rot by understanding, learning, and preparing. The truth lying among Rome's ashes is this: the greatest threat is never just beyond the walls. More often, it's in our own pockets, in the value quietly melting away without our noticing.